It started as a simple favor. My uncle and his family had asked me to house sit for a week while they went on vacation to the coast. His home was a small house in the outskirts of the city, sitting on a large property with few neighbors nearby. I had been there before, but only during summer. This was my first time visiting in the dead of winter. I left just before noon, hoping to arrive before dark. The drive was uneventful at first, just long stretches of open road, lined with barren trees and the occasional farmhouse. But as I got closer, the sky darkened and the wind picked up. The forecast had mentioned snow, but I wasn't too worried. I had driven in bad weather before. Then, as I exited the last stretch of the highway and entered the quiet suburban roads, the first flakes started to fall. By the time I reached the quiet residential street leading to the house, the snow was coming down in thick sheets. My headlights barely cut through the swirling white, and the road beneath my tires was quickly vanishing. My uncle's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, with a few other homes nearby, their driveways already covered in snow. I pulled in just as the wind howled, rattling the wooden siding of the cabin. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me. The house was small but sturdy, with a wood-burning stove in the corner and thick curtains covering the windows. A note sat on the kitchen counter. "Thanks for helping out, kid. Generator's full, firewood stocked. Just keep an eye on things. Weather's supposed to be rough." I didn't realize how bad it would get. By nightfall, the storm had become a blizzard. Wind howled through the trees, and the temperature had dropped well below freezing. I made a quick dinner, checked the locks, and settled in for the night. Then, at around 11 p.m., I heard it. A faint crunch outside. Footsteps. I froze, listening. The wind made it impossible to tell if I had imagined it. But then, another crunch, closer this time. I moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. There was someone standing just beyond the porch light. A tall figure, bundled in a heavy coat, unmoving despite the blistering cold. He wasn't facing the house. He was facing the empty lot across the street. My breath fogged against the cold window pane. The figure remained still, standing just at the edge of the light. The wind whipped around him, but he didn't move, didn't flinch. I grabbed my phone, intending to call my uncle, but there was no signal. Of course. The storm must have knocked out the local cell towers, and with so few houses nearby, I had no one to turn to for immediate help. I looked back outside. The man was still there. And then, in a slow, deliberate motion, he turned his head, not toward the house, but toward me. I dropped the curtain and stepped back, my pulse hammering. My mind raced. Was he lost? Did he need help? If so, why wasn't he knocking? The fire crackled behind me, but the warmth didn't stop the chill creeping up my spine. I double-checked the front and back doors, locked. The windows, secure. My uncle's old hunting rifle was mounted on the wall, but I had never fired a gun in my life. Still, I took it down, just in case. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, I gathered the courage to peek outside again. He was gone. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe he had been passing through. Maybe he had decided to move on. Then I noticed something. His footprints in the snow. They led from the street to my porch, but there were no footprints leading away. I barely slept. Every noise outside made me flinch. The wind howling, branches snapping under the weight of the snow, the occasional thud of ice shifting on the roof. My thoughts raced with possibilities. Was he still out there? Hiding? Waiting? By morning, the storm had worsened. Snow piled up against the windows and the driveway was completely buried. Even if I wanted to leave, I couldn't. I tried the landline. Dead. Then, around midday, I heard something outside again. Not footsteps. A scraping sound, slow and deliberate, just beyond the door. I gripped the rifle tighter and called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then 3 loud knocks on the door. I didn't move. My heart pounded. The knocks came again, harder this time. "I need help," a voice called. A man's voice, rough from the cold. I hesitated. He could be telling the truth. He could be stranded like me, but something felt wrong. "The storm is bad," I said cautiously. "There's no way out until it clears." "I know," he replied. "Let me in. It's freezing." I looked out through the peephole. He was standing on the porch now, close enough that I could see his face, or at least where his face should have been. It was covered by a scarf and thick goggles, no exposed skin, no way to tell who he was. "I can't," I said firmly. "I'm sorry." For a long moment, he was silent, Then he took a step back, standing there in the snow, waiting. The rest of the day passed in tense silence. I watched from the window as he stayed near the tree line, never straying too far. He wasn't trying to find shelter, he was waiting for something. Night fell again, and the temperature plummeted. The wind rattled the cabin. I tried to stay awake, but exhaustion took over. Then, sometime past midnight, I woke up to a sound. The back door handle turning. I jumped up, rifle in hand, my breath caught in my throat. The handle rattled again, harder this time. I aimed at the door, my hands slick with sweat despite the cold. "I have a gun!" I shouted. "Go away!" The rattling stopped. Then, after what felt like an eternity, slow footsteps crunched through the snow. They faded into the distance. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning, the storm had cleared. I cautiously stepped outside. The snow was deep, untouched, except for a single set of footprints leading from my door back into the woods. They never returned, but I never forgot. It had been a long time since I last visited my parents. With work keeping me busy and life getting in the way, the months had slipped by. When my mother called and insisted I come for a weekend, I finally gave in. I packed my bags and set off on a Friday afternoon, heading to their home in a quiet city about 200 miles away. The forecast had warned of snow, but I figured I could beat the worst of it. The first 2 hours of the drive were smooth. Just stretches of open highway, the occasional roadside diner, and a few scattered cars. But as I got closer to my parents' city, the sky darkened, and the first flakes started to fall. By the time I reached the last stretch of highway before the city, the snowfall had become heavy. The road ahead blurred into white, and I had to slow down significantly. The few cars I had seen earlier had disappeared. I was alone on the road. The highway signs were coated in ice, barely readable in my headlights. The wind howled, and my car's heater struggled to keep up. I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel, trying to stay focused. Then, out of nowhere, I saw it. A car up ahead, parked on the side of the road, partially covered in snow. I slowed down as I approached. It was an older model sedan, its hazard lights blinking faintly in the thick snow. There was no movement inside, at least none that I could see. I debated stopping. Someone could be stranded in this weather, but something felt off. The driver's side door was slightly open, and the interior light flickered weakly. Yet there were no footprints in the snow leading away from the car. I rolled past slowly, trying to see inside, but the windows were fogged over. My gut told me to keep driving, so I did. But after a few minutes, my rearview mirror caught something. The car's headlights turned on. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe the driver had just returned. Maybe they had been inside the whole time. But then, the car pulled onto the road, and it was following me. I tried to stay calm. Maybe they were just heading in the same direction. I kept my speed steady, not wanting to overreact. The snowstorm was getting worse, and the roads were barely visible. After a few miles, I switched lanes. So did the car. I slowed down. They slowed down. I sped up. So did they. This wasn't normal. I took the next exit, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. The road led to a smaller street, lined with darkened houses and barely visible driveways. I checked my mirror. The car followed. Panic began to creep in. I wasn't far from my parents' house now, but I couldn't lead this car there. I needed to lose them. I turned sharply onto a side street, then another, trying to shake them off. The tires skidded slightly on the icy pavement, but I kept control. I flicked off my headlights for a moment, hoping to disappear into the storm. When I turned back onto the main road, the car was gone. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to calm down. But just as I approached my parents' neighborhood, a familiar set of headlights appeared behind me. They had found me again. I pulled into my parents' driveway, shutting off the engine immediately. My heart pounded. The car didn't stop. It drove past slowly, disappearing into the snowy night. I stayed in my car for a moment, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Then I hurried inside, locking the door behind me. My parents greeted me warmly, oblivious to my unease. I didn't tell them about the car. I didn't want to sound paranoid. But later that night, as I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, I heard a noise outside, tires crunching on snow. I moved to the window, my breath fogging up the glass as I looked out. The car was parked across the street. I watched, frozen, as the driver's side door slowly opened. A figure stepped out. They stood there facing my parents' house, completely still. The snow swirled around them, but they didn't move, didn't flinch. I couldn't make out their face. Their hood was pulled up, their hands buried in their coat pockets. Then, after what felt like an eternity, they turned, not toward the street, but toward my window. I dropped to the floor, heart pounding. When I dared to look again, the figure was gone. The car too. The next morning I checked outside. The snow had covered any tire tracks, any footprints. Had I imagined it? No. The fear in my chest was too real. I finally told my parents. My dad frowned, concerned, while my mom shook her head dismissively. It was probably just someone lost in the storm, she said. You watch too many crime shows. So I did. An officer came by later that afternoon, taking my statement. When I described the car, his expression darkened. We've had reports about a vehicle like that before, he said. Not just in bad weather, at random times, different places. Always following, always disappearing. Did you ever catch them? I asked. The officer sighed. No license plates, no identifying marks. Every time we investigate, there's nothing left. No tracks, no leads, just gone. A chill ran through me. I stayed with my parents the rest of the weekend. No more strange cars, no more figures in the snow. By Sunday evening, the storm had cleared. The roads were safe again. I packed my things and got ready to head home. As I pulled out of the driveway, I took one last look at the neighborhood. Everything was quiet, normal. The drive back was uneventful. No unusual headlights, no lingering shadows in the rearview mirror. But even now, months later, I still think about that night, about the car, about the man who stood in the snow. I never saw them again, but I always wonder who they were and what they wanted.